Thank you to our bell choir, and thank you, Richard, for your leadership this morning. In the spring, I took a walk down the street on Cooper Avenue and took a look inside one of those miniature libraries at the end of a driveway. I looked inside and I found a copy of The Revenant by Michael Punk, the novel that became a big-time movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio. I might not have read this book were it not for the novel's subtitle, The Revenant, a novel of revenge. Ooh, what's this then, I thought. I love stories about revenge. Clean, clear justice. I know Jesus did not counsel an eye for an eye, and Gandhi said that it would leave the whole world blind, but revenge drives a lot of stories forward. It harkens back to my love of Westerns. When I was a kid in England, my grandfather was a huge Clint Eastwood fan. And I do think that Unforgiven is a truly great movie. Clint Eastwood's character is one of a reluctant and reformed man who needs to drink whiskey in order to seek out vengeance against the smiling and ruthless Gene Hackman, who plays the character of Little Bill. The most memorable lines of the movie: "You just shot an unarmed man? Well, I guess he should have armed himself." It's not exactly Shakespeare, but it sure is American. The task today is to wrestle with these words from the Sermon on the Plain, spoken to disciples 2,000 years ago, and wonder if they have any import for our culture and our context. Many of us will happily quote the last line in today's reading, but not the first. Do unto others. Do unto others seems benign enough, certainly in contrast to praying for your enemies and blessing those who curse you. This passage, of course, is sitting there primed for skullduggery all the way around, though. Who's an enemy? Are those who mistreat you everyone who casts an irritated glance your way, or a specific group of people? And giving to everyone who begs from you, surely he did not actually mean that one ought to be busy with becoming destitute simply because someone asked for all of my belongings? And if he did, well, the vast majority of us have not taken Jesus very seriously. Doing unto others? Even that can be problematic. Missionaries used to justify their theft of indigenous children in America by stating that they would not want someone else to leave them in a state of paganism, risking eternal hell. Therefore, they were justified in taking and sending children to boarding schools that would reform and save them. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You can make these verses say anything you want them to, almost. I'm confident about only two things. Every church and every time and context is supposed to wrestle with these challenging statements as a whole, and Jesus counsels disciples that it is far better to err on the side of generosity than stinginess, blessing instead of cursing, rehabilitation rather than revenge. And many of us know that we live in a culture which is built on revenge. We export revenge. There I was in the 1980s, a soot-faced scamp with a tin mug of baked beans in my house, rain lashing the windows, chemical-infused rainbow puddles outside, everything else gray. The sky was gray. The weather was gray, my clothes were gray, the food was gray, and then in color so bright, so piercingly bright, you had to squint at the TV as Clint Eastwood's horse ambled through some canyon or arroyo or some other strange archaeological feature we did not have in England, lighting his cigar with a match the first time, every time, and he could hold that match alight all day long in a sandstorm. It would not go out until he told it to go out. Justice would be done. A special man, a separate man, would act, often on behalf of a community, in an extrajudicial manner to mete out vengeance using violence to solve problems, but I also watched the A-Team. Oh man, the A-Team? The A-Team would set things right, pursue justice, take the bad guys out in California where there was never one single cloud in the sky. The whole premise, a special team of 4 people that would act on behalf of a community in an extrajudicial manner to seek revenge using violence to solve problems. I also watched Knight Rider. Oh my gosh, you guys had cars that talked in 1986. While I was eating baked beans out of a tin mug in my gray clothes, you had David Hasselhoff. And cars that knew everything and had missiles. The whole premise, a special man in a special car that would act on behalf of the community in an extrajudicial manner to make things right using violence to solve problems. We are a country that generally practices reform, correction, and guidance by removing privileges and rights, by punishing people. When we send someone to prison in our society, we do not simply send you to prison. We take away your clothes. We take away, if you're a felon, your right to vote. It's a matter of controversy about whether those rights are restored to you at any point, even though your sentence is concluded. We remove things from you as a part of your punishment. Many of us have been raised to believe that by taking things away, by punishing people for their misdeeds, we ultimately are helping reform them. Even with children, the answer is often, well, you did something, so I'm taking something away. You told a lie, so no dessert. You told a lie, so no video games, no hanging out with friends. A cascading series of removing things from our children, even when the consequence does not change the behavior that led to the consequence in the first place. I saw a comment from the other day from a father on a parenting website, absolutely exasperated. What do I do? He pleadingly asked the internet. I've taken away Xbox, and I've taken away the TV, and I've taken away the internet, and I've stopped him from hanging out with his friends, and I took away his favorite shirt, and I took away any fun on the weekends, and I took away his allowance, and there's no more pizza for dinner, and now I've taken the door from his bedroom. What else am I supposed to take away? I've run out of things to take away. And man, I'll tell you what, if there is one thing that is true in this world, it is that it sure is easy to parent other people's kids. Maybe try a different model, man. Maybe try rehabilitation rather than always punishing. I think as I work my way through a reading of The Revenant, delighting at every delicious morsel of revenge that is meted out. This week, a despicable, horrible tragedy unfolded in Norway. Man committed a mass killing, as many of you know. This week, also, Khalil Wheeler Weaver, who had killed several people in our community, was sentenced to 160 years in prison. Perhaps neither of these people deserves rehabilitation. Perhaps revenge from the state on behalf of the community is thoroughly warranted. I am not going to stand here and tell you that because I'm a Christian minister that Wheeler Weaver deserves your sympathy or our help. There will be people in Norway, I'm sure, who will want to lock up that Danish man who committed that horrible crime for the rest of his life and throw away the key. But we also know that that won't happen. We know that the maximum sentence that someone can receive in Norway is 20 years. It can be extended at the end of that 20-year term if you're still deemed to be unfit to be a neighbor to others. This, it's on the front cover of your bulletins, is Halden Prison, a maximum security prison not far from Oslo. You'll notice that there's no barbed wire on top of the fence in front of the prison. And in fact, around the back, there's no wire at all, just a concrete barrier that curves and slopes so that it appears as an artistic design more than a barrier to keep people in. The prison has won modern architectural and design awards for its exterior and landscaping. Also for the way in which natural light is used with fixtures to create a bright and airy feel, even in a place like the dining hall. In Norway, it takes at least 2 years to train a prison officer. Inmates are released from the cells, which are basically tidy efficiency apartments, early in the morning to their work. They won't return until after 8 o'clock at night. They wear street clothes. The officers are not armed. The warden of Halden Prison says that there are no life sentences in Norway, so someday we will release your neighbor. If we treat people like animals, then we send an animal to live on your street. If we release a neighbor will move to your street. Inmates are taught a variety of skills, some artistic, some practical. Everyone who is released, in order to be released, has to be qualified to be a mechanic or a chef or a carpenter or perform some other job in society. Perhaps these next two pictures symbolize what they are trying to do best. A game of volleyball outside. A bold, tattooed, bare-chested man, who I assume is not an officer, is moving towards the net, about to spike the ball, and is being assisted by a female guard who's unarmed. She is setting the ball for him to succeed. And lastly, an ecumenical chapel that is clean, meditative space to pray and think. The head of the Halden prison acknowledges that many Norwegians, never mind foreigners, many Norwegians think this is far, far too much. This is ridiculously excessive, that the costs are not justified, that it costs about double per inmate to house someone at Halden in comparison to an equivalent facility in the US or the UK. But the recidivism rate is much, much lower, and the sentences are far shorter. Revenge or rehabilitation. These pictures of this prison are almost, in our way of looking at the world, a practical joke. Rehabilitation or revenge. We live in a country where these verses from the Sermon on the Plain are much more likely to be heard in public on a Sunday than they are in Norway. But it is hard to see how we as a society err on the side of generosity, virtue, and rehabilitation. That's prisons, criminals, felons, TV shows, movies. What does that have to do with us? Yesterday we held a small service of interment in the Memorial Garden. You may have noticed the chairs there when you came in this morning. We remembered Sina. We heard some testimonies of her generosity towards family and friends, church members, community, charity. We spoke of a long, long life, of prospering, of flourishing. She hadn't just lived a good life, but a flourishing life marked by hospitality, joy, and generosity. It's really hard to live with hospitality, joy, and generosity if your worldview is also marked by a need for revenge, a desire for vengeance, a yearning for extrajudicial justice achieved through violence and retribution. It's hard to live generously and with joy and with hospitality if your whole mindset is to take things away, constantly take things away, punish and punish and punish until all that's left is a child removed from friends and family and foods and doesn't even have a bedroom door anymore, a kid staring at the wall, talking to nobody, made to feel like what? A criminal? Today we will ask you, as we discuss engagement and community engagement, why you're here. Why are you here? What do you want from this place? What do you hope to gain? How do you want to engage the church, and how might the church engage you? For me, I know that these words of Jesus, these lessons handed down across the generations, that if we are to err on the side of generosity and joy, on the side of rehabilitation and not revenge, is a much needed antidote to so much that I have learned along the way from our culture, an antidote to my own thinking errors. Very few of us can do this work of being moral people, halfway decent parents, and citizens who advocate for the right things. all alone. Peace be with you.